Good day, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's FOLIO Forum, which is sponsored by the Open Library Environment, EBSCO, and Index Data. My name is Eric Hartnett. I'm the Director of Electronic Resources at Texas A&M University and the host for today's event. Today, we will hear about the experiences some of FOLIO's early implementers have had with the system. Today's session, like all FOLIO forums, is being recorded and will be posted to the Open Library Foundation's YouTube channel and to the resources section of folio.org. As an open forum, participants can see participants' names and all questions submitted, and we have muted everyone except the speakers to ensure good sound quality. We value your participation and encourage you to engage in the topic. Please use the Q&A box within Zoom to enter questions and comments as they come to you. We have a full program, so we will hold off on answering questions until the end. Also, if you have ideas for topics for future forums, please share them in the Q&A box as well. If you like to tweet, please use the Twitter hashtag FolioForum. We also encourage you to continue the conversation on this topic on the FOLIO discussion website, discuss.folio.org. We have 4 speakers today, and I'm going to stick with first names for fear of butchering last names. Our speakers today are Lisa, librarian at Chalmers University, Peter, acquisitions and e-resource strategy librarian at Cornell University, Brooks, information technology coordinator at Missouri State University, and Annika, digital services librarian at UB Leipzig. And with that, I will turn things over to Lisa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Sjögren from Chalmers in Sweden. I will pull up my slides and share my screen very soon. Let's see. Okay. Can someone verify that you can see my slides?
We can see it.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so I work at Chalmers Library in Gothenburg, Sweden. We are a technological library. We have 4 branch libraries, and we're about 50 employees here at the library. And we're very focused on electronic material. It's important to note, but we also have print circulation, and that needs to work. I just noted down some things here in the corner that we also work with a lot. So we have a section at the library that works with information literacy, with bibliometrics. We built our own current research information system. So we do have some experience with developing tools here at Chalmers, but we participated and we implemented FOLIO as users rather than part of the development community. About 3 years ago, we were using Sierra as our ILS, and we were using Summon for discovery, Intoda for ERM, and for different reasons, we decided that we would see if we might change to another system. And at somewhere around this point, FOLIO showed up. And for us, this happened partly because EBSCO were looking for beta partners. So the first library to implement FOLIO with EBSCO as support and hosting provider. And when this happened, we had already done some previous work to see what we wanted in a new system or a new set of systems. And FOLIO checked off that. It was very new FOLIO when this started happening, so everything wasn't there. But what we saw was that it was being built from scratch, so it would be fresh code. It would be easy to integrate with other systems with its open APIs, and that's something that we really value, and that is, I think, very important in the general sort of system environment of today. You want them to be able to talk to each other because you're not going to be alone at your library. And Folio would let us pick which apps we want to use. And that's also important because a lot of large systems have a lot of amazing functionality that not everyone uses, but you still have to pay for them even if you don't. We definitely have that with our previous ILS, and with Folio, it's much easier to say that we don't need this, we're not going to use it. So it was also possible with Folio to either host it yourself or to use a vendor. And we said that, yes, we want vendor support and we want vendor hosting because even if we have developer resources at Chalmers, we would rather use those for developing other kinds of things like the quiz system. So we wanted something hosted. And we have also always said that the community around the system is really important for us because it lets you, it's so good to be able to send an email to someone and ask them, how do you do this? How does this work? So that's also an important thing. And we really did get that with Folio because you have the user community and the development community here. Going into Folio now, and even more, I think, when we did it and it was really in development, was an amazing chance for us to learn how a library system is made up and to just see it evolve. And we also thought that Folio was a really interesting addition to a market that was seeming to stagnate already 3 years ago, and that has become even less diverse now. So with EBSCO's help, we implemented Folio. And since September 30th in 2019, so that's about half a year ago, we are using Folio as our ILS and as our system for managing electronic resources. So I said we were able to pick and choose which apps to use. You can see we're using the checkout app, the check-in app, users, requests, inventory. This is for print materials, and orders, organizations, agreements, licenses. Let's see. Orders and organizations, that's also for print materials, but organizations, agreements, and licenses is for ERM as well. But we're not using, for example, there's a big advanced finance app that we didn't need because we are handling those kinds of things in the institutional system at Chalmers University. So we did not need to do that. And we're using Folio together with a bunch of other systems like Libris, the Swedish Union Catalog, which is where we do all of our cataloging, and then we get the records into Folio, and we don't do anything at all with them there except add holdings and items. So all the bibliographic data has its master source in the Union Catalog. And we've built an integration with that, which is working really well and is very efficient and good. And that's thanks to the APIs of Folio that we were able to use. We're also using EBSCO's knowledge base and EBSCO Discovery Service. The Discovery Service, as we're using with Folio, also works as a sort of OPAC, if you want to use that word. So that's where all the patron empowerment functionality happens. Seeing your loans, renewing your loans, managing your requests. So we don't have an OPAC that is connected to Folio, but EBSCO or EDS is the only patron-facing layer. For authentication, we're using OpenAthens. And we are also using Folio with self-service kiosks from Biblioteca, with NetLoan for logging into some computers, and with single sign-on for logging into Folio for our library staff. And I'm going to do a little demo of our Folio instance. Let's see if I can find that there. Okay, so I would log in via SSO as a librarian. And then when I log in, I need to choose a service point. So this is to say which library I'm at, basically, and that matters when you check things in. So I'm going to show you inventory. This is where we have our print materials. Let's see. For example, this one. And you can see here, here's an ID from the Swedish Union catalog. So that's connected to a record there. And I cannot actually, if I do like this, if I click edit here, I can't actually edit the bibliographic data here. So if I wanted to do that, I would have to go into the Union catalog, and the changes that I did there would come into FOLIO. So we're avoiding doing double work in different places. But I'm going to show you how to check out an item here. So I just cheated and copied the barcode. And I will go to checkout. And I will use myself to check this out too. And this is not a real barcode, it's a test item with the test loan policy. So this is how it works. And if I go to my FOLIO account now, I can see that I have actually 6 open loans. And we are also using the requests app, but let's see. And so when we acquire new items, we first catalog them in the Union catalog, and then we import them into FOLIO, and then we add orders here. So that's what we're using the orders app for, to keep track of when things are arriving. And let's see. For electronic resource management, we have licenses and organizations, which is tied together in the agreements app. Let's see, we can look at an agreement here. And we could also look at settings. So for example, in settings, that is where we've set up all the loan policies and the loan rules that make circulation possible. And when we migrated to FOLIO, we tried to keep things very simple. So I think we had about 50 loan rules in Sierra, and now we maybe have around 15. So we try to make everything very easy to guess for users. Things should not be too different depending on patron groups. That's also something that we reduced very much when we migrated. So let's see. I will talk a bit more about our implementation process, and let's see. So here's a picture of our implementation team. We had a project coordinator, and we also had a group of systems librarians. We were 2 systems librarians and several ERM librarians who worked very intensely on this implementation. And since we are a pretty sort of small and concentrated library, we're in the same in the same building, we were able to go and talk to our colleagues pretty easily. So we're kind of a concentrated team. And we also had developers on site who worked with the integrations that we built. And finally, the entire staff at Chalmers was, of course, involved in this process in one way or another. For example, we had some workshops where where they helped us test FOLIO, as well as learning FOLIO, where we did that. And also all through this implementation, our colleagues just were really good at just handling changes during the migration, but also with FOLIO, because FOLIO has been evolving incredibly quickly during the past 2 years, and is still evolving. So all our staff has been very good at sort of reevaluating and developing their workflows and figuring out ways to do things the best way in FOLIO, and that's really great to see. And as I said, we implemented with EBSCO. So we had an implementation consultant from EBSCO, Theodore Tolstoy, who is also based in Sweden, which was a big advantage. He's part of a team of implementation consultants that was very helpful. And they did all this sort of more technical stuff, the technical migration EBSCO has helped us with. And they're also taking care of hosting, so making sure that our environment is healthy and doing as it should. And we've also had incredible support from the whole FOLIO community with everything. And since we're the first library to implement FOLIO and to use it in production, we've been able to communicate very extra well, I think, with the community, and then there's been a lot of focus on getting us live. So I think the implementation it had a lot of aspects that would happen that would be part of any implementation. So we had to decide what we wanted to do with FOLIO. Sort of how do we want to use it? We wanted to use it for print material management, circulation, for electronic research management. We had to understand it and figure out which apps would help us do that. We need to build integrations with, for example, the Union Catalog, with EDS. We had to configure FOLIO, like the loan rules, circulation rules, to make it do what we wanted. And we needed to get our data into FOLIO. First of all, decide which data we wanted to move, and then get it in there, and then teach our staff how to use FOLIO. And I think that's things that you need to do in any system migration and system implementation. But with in our case, we also had the added interesting aspect that no one else had done this before. So we got to figure a lot of things out from scratch, and also keep up with FOLIO's very rapid development. So yeah, that was a lot of fun and a big challenge as well. And some things that we learned, and that I'm very grateful that we learned, was that it's really important to not take anything for granted, to not take functionality for granted, because just because you assume that something is something everyone needs, that might not be the truth. So it's very important to verbalize what you need, to figure out what you need to perform your daily workflows, and then verbalize it, and then make sure that you can get it. And also then to not assume that anything is working, but test it. So test your workflows. Make sure that they are working in the new system, that they're working as you expect. Test, keep an eye on any automated activities to make sure that they are working. Also, test migrations. I think we, just when we were getting close to the final migration, we were doing one complete test migration every week and noting down the results very carefully and seeing the changes from 1 week to the next. That was extremely a very valuable way of figuring out how best to get to represent our data in Folio, and how find things that we needed to clean in our source system as well. We also learned that sometimes the sort of pure vision that you have in the beginning might not really work with the reality, because things are complex, because there are a lot of different ideas to take into account. And I think that's okay. It's sometimes your vision needs to meet reality to get better as well. We try to work very hard with getting some things, getting some functionality that was really amazing, really good, so that the sort of the pains and the difficulties of going through a system implementation, a system migration, would not be as bad, because some things are difficult. It's challenging for our colleagues, but some things got much better with Folio than they were before. And then you can sort of point to that. But look, this is much better now. And then maybe it's worth having some other functionality being a bit confusing or just new for a while. And in communicating with our staff, and making this process good for them, it's also been very important, I think, to first of all take in their feedback, because that's incredibly valuable to us as the implementation team and to the Folio community, but also to give them feedback in return and let them see how quickly things are changing, and things are changing quickly with Folio. So that's been, I think it's been amazing, because if you report something that is not working as it should, and it takes a year for it to get picked up and fixed, then you're going to sort of lose hope. But if it gets fixed directly in a few months, then that's okay. So that's a really important thing to communicate. And I think that throughout this process, being part of testing and being part of seeing Folio develop, not only the implementation team at Chalmers, but also like all the staff has gained a sort of sense of ownership of the system, the feeling that we are part of developing something that we like. That's been really good. So next, we are looking forward to continue to use and explore Folio, which is still changing. There's a new release coming up pretty soon. We've had a look at it. A lot of fun things are coming. We're also look forward to exploring the integrations that we have more, making them better, making, and looking at new integrations possibly. As we're doing this, we are always contributing our insights and feedback to the community, because there are so many things that you notice and realize when you're using the systems in your day-to-day life, and I think it's very valuable to give back. We are also let's see. And this was, I had too many slides here that were sort of duplicate. We're also really look forward to sharing these experiences and advice with other Folio libraries. So both in sharing experience of implementation with other libraries who are just coming into Folio, but also having those colleagues who we can call and ask for advice eventually when they're using FOLIO. And we're looking forward to seeing other libraries integrate FOLIO with other systems, because that's one of the big strengths of FOLIO. Its integratability, and I really look forward to seeing that being explored more by other libraries as well. And also, we look forward to continuing to be part of the development of this amazing system and this community that is so that it's so great to be part of. And that was it. And we're gonna save questions for later, so I'm gonna step out and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
You got it, Peter?
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. I look forward to sharing some information about our experience in implementing FOLIO at Cornell University. I'd like to point out a little bit about where we are in terms of FOLIO and our process of implementing it at Cornell. As a bit of background, we've been using Voyager since about 2000. So as I was realizing not long ago, many of our students are younger than our online catalog. But we've applied a blacklight interface since about 2014, which we will continue to use after we have fully implemented FOLIO across the board. We've been using e-resources management tools from Ex Libris / Serial Solutions since about 2010, used different products at different times, from the knowledge base and link resolvers, the MARC records from them, the discovery layer, and things like that. And what's particularly relevant here is that we have been using Intoda as an e-resources management tool. And prior to that, we were using the III system. So Cornell has been using an ERM tool for quite a while. And as any other institution, we have a variety of other tools that we're using as well. So at Cornell, we've been very involved in FOLIO development. We have a number of developers who are dedicated to FOLIO. We have a lot of product owners and SIG conveners and chair of the product council and many others who are currently at Cornell. So for us, development is a very important part of the process. But at the same time, we're also, of course, implementing FOLIO. We have two separate teams for that. One team is doing development and one team is doing implementation. Many people are on both teams, but they are two separate events going on essentially at the same time at Cornell. So as part of our implementation process, we began using FOLIO as our interface to the EBSCO knowledge base when we switched from the Ex Libris Serial Solutions products to EBSCO last fall. So since October 2019, we've been using FOLIO's interface to EBSCO's holdings link management tool. So just for that e-holdings aspect initially. But we liked the interface. We liked it a bit better than the native EBSCO holdings links management interface. So we've started to get to know it. We've had a good feel for it in that time. And in February, we began populating and using FOLIO ERM as a replacement for the Intoda ERM. So I like to say, as far as I'm aware, we are the first implementer in the non-Sweden division. So we've been using license data, organizations data, which we did import from our ERM tool from Intoda, and then e-holdings data, which was populated via an API to the EBSCO knowledge base. And I'll demonstrate these in just a moment. And then we're creating agreements individually, and sort of all of those different parts hang off of the agreement. At least that's the way I look at it. I think it's very important to remember that FOLIO can be implemented in many, many, many different ways. And we, even now with many institutions preparing to implement it or giving it a try, or even some that are, we see different institutions doing it in different ways. And so there are a lot of different ways of doing it. I think that's very important to note. The FOLIO ERM, which I will demonstrate in a moment, is something that we set up ourselves within Cornell with our own Cornell developers creating it. However, we have made a commitment to have our implementation supported by EBSCO, for the full implementation supported by EBSCO. And we kicked off that project on Monday with our first meeting with the EBSCO team. It was obviously virtual. I think that it would not have been a virtual, it would have been an in-person meeting if it were not for the environment that we all live in right now. But we do intend to implement all parts of FOLIO in July 2021, so 13 months, 12 months away. And as I mentioned, all of that will be provided by EBSCO. We'll be using many of the tools, the apps rather, that Lisa identified. You know, we use some of them now. We'll do some, it'll be a little bit different, but we will be using the acquisitions module and all of that. Currently, we are continuing to add our various e-resources contracts to the FOLIO ERM part of the system. And so we've done a number of those. And now I'd like to take an opportunity to show you what our implementation actually looks like. As I said, this is our Cornell hosted implementation. This is production, but it is only the ERM tools. So where Lisa had many different apps across the top of in her implementation, we just have a few. We have organizations, licenses, agreements, e-holdings, and e-usage. So I'll talk about each one a little bit, and I may repeat things a couple times because it's helpful for me to keep track of all of these things. They can vary quite a bit. I've made my text a little bit larger, so it may cramp things up a little bit. We'll see, but I hope it looks okay for everybody right now. You can see we have 356 records, which we migrated from Intoda to the licenses app of FOLIO. And if I go through them, each one has a bit of information. So many of these have not really been looked at quite yet. As I said, we really started doing this work in, we started being effective in the work we were doing in February. And then of course, things changed across the board. So the way that I look at this, and this has been this particular thing I'm going to talk about has been a challenge for a lot of people. It's still a challenge for me. I think I'm going to get this right, but you know, I'm never quite certain. The two apps, agreements and licenses, they can be difficult to kind of understand what they are. And the way that I view them is that the agreements app describes what it is in your collection that you can access, while the licenses app describes what you can do with that. Then separately, the organizations describes, you know, either a content provider or a platform or the vendor from whom you acquire something, a variety of different things here. So in this case for ArtStore, we have also ArtStore as the vendor who provides the resource to us. You can see in the lower left corner that we link out to report.artstore.org there. We're storing the username and password there. And if I click on show credentials, that will show those. So I'll pass on that right now. Here we have the ArtStore license. Now, in this particular case, there are a lot of different ways that you can store licenses. In this particular case, we are storing it within FOLIO itself. That's one thing that you can do, and it'll bring up this digitized version of our ArtStore license agreement. But there are other ways that you can do this as well. You could store it, you could indicate the building where it's stored, the filing cabinet, say, or what we primarily do is we store them in a box.com system that we've put together a series of folders. And so we have a link directly to that. And then the other thing that, let's see, so if I go over to take a look at the organizations, you'll see that I've jumped from licenses to organizations. And so it's waiting to bring up the ArtStore one. But one of the things that you can see in here is that there are interfaces. And the interface can describe how you access the resources for that, access the reports for that particular vendor, or the admin interface where you manage your subscription, your IP addresses, things like that, or it could be the public facing version of it. And so all of that stuff can be saved and available in there. I'm going to let's see if the organizations will come up here. I thought I was very clear to my teenage son that this is a time where there's no recreational use of the internet allowed, but I don't know, maybe somebody else is using my internet connection right now. Here is an example of these interfaces. And I clicked on my edit tab there. So I have contacts, I have various interfaces here. I can add an additional interface if I want. We have 43 interfaces that we've created here, and each one represents the way in which you, as I said, you access a particular resource, or you access the reports or things like that. So that's some of the things that one can do there. So organizations, we have 801 in here. Again, this is information that was brought in from Intoda. Agreements is the area where we're adding new content. That's why we only have 47 here. We've been adding them as we go, as we look at a physical contract or as a digital contract that we find in. So we're going to work through all of the ones that we have in our collection. As one example, Acta Horticulturae from the International Society for Horticultural Science. The agreement line is what describes what we actually have in this particular collection. And here we have one particular journal that's available here. When I click on that, I'm now going to eHoldings. eHoldings is where the information from the EBSCO HLN, the Holdings Link Management information is coming across via the API. So there's bibliographic information, descriptive information about it, and information about our coverage, and then it will link back to our agreement as well, if we would like. And then in Adam Matthew, here's a different example. We have, in this case, we buy a lot of different things from Adam Matthew. We had an initial agreement signed in 2007, and then as we acquire new sets of resources from them, we have an additional addendum to describe those different resources. So in this particular case, these are all of these different resources to which we subscribe. Each one has different information, which again, I've gone to eHoldings here, and I'm pulling this information back from the information that is stored in the EBSCO knowledge base. And then I'll provide one more example, and then there's one more thing that I'd like to highlight. Here with TEMA publishers, I will expand all. In this case, I haven't added any, well, these are internal costs. We have a variety of different agreement lines for monographic collections that we have acquired from them. So we bought a collection of 51 titles in 2010, or that was their 2010 collection, and 43 titles from their 2011 collection, and 30 titles from their 2012 collection. We can go see what each of those titles are if we want to. But I will jump back here and when I'm looking, let's see, this is TEMA. So beyond the agreement collections, here is our controlling license. If I click on that, this takes us to our licenses resource here, and then I can see the organization and then the core documents. So you can see everything is connected in different ways. And this is a link to our box.com account, the Cornell Enterprise collection, and I'm able to bring up our authorization form that that we signed with them to make this accessible. So one of the things that I think is useful to look at how we're managing the licenses, for example, is to look at things like when we're looking at, say, these multi-user collections. Say, well, we have some from eBrary, because again, we imported this from Intoda. So these will be changed to ProQuest collections eventually. But say we have a set of titles, a collection of monographs that we've acquired from EBSCO, and these are each one is a 4-user access, or a different one is a 5-user access. This is the license that controls what we can access through that particular collection. And then through the EBSCO holdings link management, we would add the individual titles. In our implementation, we're not going to add the individual titles within, say, agreements, a separate agreement line for each one, as some other institutions might do if they choose to do that. What we'll do is have that managed in holdings, in EBSCO's knowledge base, in the holdings link management, and then we have access to it from the API. So here in licenses, each of these represents how many people can access it, concurrent users, if you can offer it through interlibrary borrowing, and other various terms and other amendments that are relevant in those particular cases. Then in agreements, we define what exactly is in which collections we have access to, and then they have a link to e-holdings to describe what maybe the specific title lists, in a sense. And then organizations, as I said, describes each of those different organizations. So in many cases, what we've been doing is, if we say, okay, this is the organization that provides the content, this is the organization who is the vendor, that is who we pay. Often it's the same, but not always. So that is a very brief overview of how we are using FOLIO ourselves right now. And again, I want to emphasize that we are using only the FOLIO ERM aspects, and then in July of 2021, we'll start using it for circulation and cataloging and reserves and all of the other aspects of that collection. Thanks very much, and I'll turn it back over to you, Eric.
Thank you, Peter. You ready to go, Brooks?
I should be. Just a second here. Oops, not what I wanted to do. You all seen my screen?
Yes.
Is it a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Brooks Travis. I'm the IT coordinator at Missouri State University Libraries in Springfield, Missouri. Talk a little bit about our implementation portfolio. Provide some institutional context about Missouri State University and our library system. We have approximately 30,000 library users. It's trending downward a little bit as our enrollment trends downward a little bit right now. We're about 84% undergraduate. We're a doctoral professional classification institution. We have 4 libraries. One that's part of a K-12 lab school, one that's part of our 2-year college affiliate, and another one that's part of our ag campus and the main library on the main campus in Springfield. We've been part of a consortial relationship called Mobius for about 20 years. And as part of that, we've used a shared Sierra ILS system. For our FOLIO implementation, we're also being hosted by EBSCO. We're also implementing EBSCO Discovery Service and Open Athens as part of the same project. That's been ongoing since October, basically. We just switched on our website for EDS and started using Open Athens for our access management stuff this last week. Portfolio, we're going live in June 2020. That's kind of a hard date for us because of some contractual reasons with our consortium, and we're going to be doing the full suite: circulation, inventory, acquisitions, finance, and ERM. As far as our implementation team, we have a steering committee with multiple implementation advisory working groups organized under that. The different IAWGs focus on the different areas of our implementation. We have an IAWG for ERM, and then sub IAWGs under a broader FOLIO core IAWG for inventory and cataloging, as well as circulation and acquisitions. And then we have our EDS and Open Athens implementations that are also organized in the same way. And these groups all work in partnership with our EBSCO implementation consultant. Similar team to what Lisa was mentioning earlier. Do a brief demo. I'm going to have to switch my share for a second. This is our test instance. We have a production instance as well that's right now focused on ERM because it is connected directly to our active holding link management system. But this is our test tenant, set up identically to how our production tenant will be once we go live. But again, we're doing the full set of applications. We've got about 1.3 million records in our inventory currently. As Lisa mentioned, we're still in the process of migrating, so we're doing a lot of test migrations and migrate, test data, migrate again. We're planning to do a full dress rehearsal of our migration once the next release of FOLIO hits SameFlower later in April. Can't really cover much new from what Lisa and Peter have covered so far in terms of ERM functionality and our inventory and holdings information. We are currently using, one thing I've noticed that's somewhat unique about our setup is we're using Azure Active Directory as our single sign-on system for FOLIO. We did that so we could have multi-factor authentication. We're using OpenAthens, again, for our EDS authentication, our patient authentication, but we're using Azure AD for our staff sign-in side. That's mostly it as far as unique things about our setup. I'm happy to come back and answer some questions if anyone has them later about specifics of our process and setup, but that's mostly it for now. I'm gonna bail out of here and go back to my other presentation. That's it for right now. I'm very much open to questions, but we're very much in the live migrate early, migrate often phase of our process right now.
Thank you very much, Brooks. Monica, you ready to go?
So then, yeah, I'm ready. I'll
Thank you.
try to share my screen. I hope you can see it all. Great. So well then, I'll tell you about our implementation at Leipzig University Library. If it wants to work. So first, a few very quick facts about Leipzig University Library itself. So it was founded quite some time ago, 1543. We've got approximately 30,000 patrons, about 200 employees, and we are currently using as an ILS Libro from the Australian, from the Australians. Our current ERM is AMSL. That's a homegrown system that we developed ourselves. Our discovery system is also homegrown. That's Think community using VuFind. And we've got many software development projects in general, including FOLIO at the moment. So FOLIO at Leipzig University, just as I said, we are developing the e-usage app here at Leipzig, and we are also implementing in our library. We decided to have 2 rounds of implementation. So first we will go only ERM based, with a go live date in spring this year. This will be hosted on campus by our library staff. So we've got no vendor at the moment who is helping us with that, but we're coping quite well at the moment. And then we've got the second round, which is the full implementation, where we've got no fixed go live date at the moment. Yes. Round 1 is not only Leipzig, but we've got 5 university libraries from Saxony that are using AMSL at the moment, so our current ERM system. And we will set up one multi-tenant system for FOLIO, and we will go live step by step after Leipzig goes first. Yeah, as I said, ERM based, I think probably most of us understand something a little different by this. What do we mean by ERM based? It's, well, in a nutshell, it's just implementation of FOLIO for all electronic resource related workflows, except one thing. So our budgetary system will stay the same for evidence reasons, and because it was quite hard for us to divide our budgets for print and electronic resources. So as long as we don't have a full implementation, FOLIO will only have budget information, but not be the evidence system for this. Yes, our apps in focus are, first of all, agreements. I think we are the only one of us four here who will be using the GoKB, the Global Open Knowledge Base, and not relying on e-holdings. Then we will be using licenses, e-usage, organizations, and the acquisition suite, well, parts of it, and only in parts, yes. We also get 2 other apps that are custom apps for managing our catalog metadata for the Think community, Think Config and Select. I don't think I have time to tell anything about them. Maybe in at some other time. Yes, and what do we also mean by ERM-based migration? It's the full migration of all data from the legacy system, so it will be a full replacement, and we want to include all of the historical data. So it will be from 2014 following. Other question would be why ERM first? So we have multiple reasons for that. Most of them is to try it in a small subset. Yeah, we've got a small team of 7 people related to ERM, and it's a relatively well-defined use case. It's not that big. We've got experience from development of our homegrown ERM system. It won't involve any patron-facing systems, so if anything breaks or doesn't work out that well, nobody will see it, and we will cope with it somehow. We've got relatively small data sets. That doesn't count for this e-resources tab and the GoKB data, but we don't have an inventory with all those thousands of data items. Yes, and then last but not least, once we start full implementation, the ERM team can function as multiplicators. Yes, my demo will be next. We have different systems available, and I couldn't really decide on which one to take for this. We've got a staging system, which is the eDevice release that's got the tested, stable migrated data, and we've got a testing system, which has daily CI builds. And the newest code is it's kind of FameFlower Plus. And I think I will try it because it's something new to see. And I hope it won't get too buggy. You can see it? Yes. So yeah, those are our custom apps that I mentioned. And we've got full apps here because that's our test system, but we don't use them. So there's no data for check-in, check-out, and so on. I will go to agreements first. There are our migrated records that are about 900 at the moment. And I think I will just go through one of those agreements. I think Peter has already shown most of the functionality, but I try to show something of what we migrated. So maybe I'll take annual reviews. There we go. Here are our descriptions, our data there. They're controlling licenses in this example and historical licenses. So there was a swap from Alliance license to consortial license, and we migrated it to have the historical information still there. Here as well, it's linked, just as Peter demonstrated. So we're in the licenses app now. There's the annual reviews license. There are organizations linked there. Documents not in this system. Yes, and of course, the terms that are set or not set in this case. Yes. So going back to agreements, there are the licenses. The license and business terms that I just showed you in the licenses app are here as well, that you don't have to click all the way through the apps just to see them. There are also the organizations. I could show you this as well. So this is all our migrated data. So there's nothing added by anybody, but it was just migrated yesterday, I think. So there's this vendor. We don't have contact people here. I think we've got contact people for this one. So there you can see all of this, addresses, phone numbers, anything you need to call somebody. What we didn't migrate are the interfaces, because our legacy system didn't link them to the organization, and there was no way to really match them while migrating. So there are some things that we couldn't take with us. I come back to that with the decisions we made later on. Well, what's next? Organizations, other periods. Yes, that's quite important. As I said, we have this old system filled with data from 2014 onwards, and we thought about it quite a lot, how to migrate this best to FOLIO, because our old system didn't have agreement periods or any concept to match them into one agreement. But we have had one agreement for each year, and we decided to take the data from the current year and only have the periods migrated from the historic data. Yes, then there are usage data providers, in this case annual reviews. We can go there. This takes us to e-usage directly. We've got 42 data providers at the moment. There's our harvesting configuration, and this is one vendor, I hope. Yes, that has statistics loaded at the system. And that's just journal report 1, counter 4, but there you go. There's something. Yes, the last part I wanted to show you is notes. I'll come to that later on with our decisions we made. You can see here, that's Kosten in German, that's Cost in English. So our financial data is just mapped to notes here at the agreement for different reasons. I'll try to switch back to my presentation now. Yes, I think that worked. And there we go with our 3 of our decisions we made on the way. We made a lot of decisions. Just as Lisa said, at the moment, you have to decide how to use the system, what you want to do with the system. And there's really a lot to think about. One of these things was contract data versus content data. Peter just showed you how the e-holdings app integrated. So you have a lot of content data in your agreements. But we chose to use the GoKB, so there aren't that many data sets in there, and we didn't have the connection in our old system. So we decided to focus on agreements and on licenses with the migrated data we have available, and to prioritize the contract management functionalities over e-resource data at the first step. So we cannot look up which journal belongs to which agreement, but we have chosen to be able to have good management of when to renew a contract or see where the signed document lives in. So yes, those agreement lines, they will follow manually step by step, just as the knowledge base grows and just as we have time. Every time we touch the agreement, somebody will try to link something there. Another point was fields not available in FOLIO. I think that's quite a common problem for libraries who want to migrate from another system. In agreements, we said at first we tried to map this to this description section. We ran that that lucky with this, because you cannot search the description section, for instance. Now at the moment, agreements has those supplementary properties available, where we can model correct fields to map to them. And we are hoping that custom fields will become available as well. But that's some of those decisions to make, that can you live without being able to search for something that you could search before you migrated to FOLIO. Yes, and the last point is finance data migration. Our legacy data is very basic, and the FOLIO data model is quite complex because it's a full-grown ILS system. And we decided to not do any automatic migration into orders, invoices, and finances because there's so much risk for mistakes. Instead, we migrated them into the notes section. They're available for manual lookup, and we will try to start using orders, invoices, and finances with the current fiscal year, and we'll have to manually add the data. Yes, another 3 points. Now, lessons learned. There are also a lot of more lessons we learned, and there will become, there will be a lot more, because we are only in the process at the moment. One of the hardest things is well, it's hard to keep up to a very fast development progress. You have to decide for release, and you have to test your data and your workflows on this release. So still, it's a lot of pain, especially in our case when we try to think about agreement periods and how to split contracts to different periods. When at EDL, at the DAISY release, we didn't have those agreement periods, but we already thought about it, and this will happen a lot. And so you have to decide and test on one system, but you still have to look out for the new features and changes while you test and consider what you will be changing with the next release. Yes. Second lesson learned is prioritize and settle for good enoughs for the moment. So we have learned that it isn't possible to get everything perfect at once, and you will have only a lot of stress trying to achieve this, and it's better to decide what functionality you really need and what can follow later. So one of these examples was our mapping of fields to this non-searchable description field because there wasn't another chance to do it. Yes. And the last one is just, well, more organizational. You've got to define specific tasks and people and deadlines. We're a very small team, and we were very open at the moment at the first, and but there's a lot to do for everybody and a lot to test, and there's so much progress in the development, and you really need to set yourself short time goals to achieve something, to test something while it's already testable. And you also need to look out for being distracted, because it's a very complex system. And when you tell somebody, please test the functionality, then you need to define what needs to be tested. Do you want to test the workflows? Do you want to test the data that has been migrated? Or do you really want to have bugs filed? And you come from one point to the other and to the next, and it won't stop. And last but not least, you've got to define workflows and people to get the feedback and questions back to the community, because that also is in very fast progress, and you cannot have all your people who are testing and who are working with the system join the SIX and try to communicate directly, because that's just such an overhead in communication and in organization. So there also need to be workflows. Yeah, I think this list will grow fast in the next weeks. Yes, what's next? First of all, we're a little behind in our plan, because all of us have these problems of establishing some kind of working routine from working from home and to become comfortable with the situation. And then we will go to our really next points to define internal application guidelines, best practices, because FOLIO and especially this ERM suite offers a lot of different approaches how to do things. I think you've just seen 4 different approaches by 4 people. And that's something you really need to think about and figure out what's best for your institution, and to write it down for somebody to have a reference. Yes, then another thing will be work on the German translation. That's really hard behind at the moment, but we will start with this soon, I think, with all the other German libraries who want to migrate in the future. Then we have to retest our migration scripts for the Fame Flower release. That's another drawback of this fast development that is very cool at the other side. You really need to retest and retest and retest. Yeah, and then we will go live. And after that, we will start over again for run 2 for our full implementation. So thank you.
Thank you, Annika. So I think we can open things up for questions. If you would use the Q&A functionality, and we have a few already in the queue. So the first question is, how robust is FOLIO for detailed copy-specific information as is needed for special collections libraries? And does it integrate with archival processing systems? I can answer the second part, maybe. There's an app developed by a company called Archivum. That they've developed an app called Perpetua, which works with special collections, and I think it may do some of the archival processing.
I would say, so we don't have, our material is pretty straightforward most of the time, but there's a lot of possibility for entering a lot of different information on the item level, is in my opinion. So I think if you explore, if you maybe go to one of the test instances of FOLIO and explore what you can, the information that you can enter on the holdings and item level, that might be helpful. There's a lot of fields for COP-specific information that we are not actually using at Chalmers. So.
I don't know actually the specifics of this, but we do have a lot of special collections at Cornell, and it's a very important area for us. So I feel like I should have a better answer there. So it's something I could pursue if that'd be useful, because but I don't have a very specific answer to the question right now.
I think there's also a special interest group for special collections, right? That is looking at those, at this functionality and the requirements for that. So that's also a possibility, reaching out to that group.
So second question is, and I think this is for you, Lisa, do the Biblioteca self-check devices use a native Biblioteca software, or is there a FOLIO app on them? Do you use RFID or barcodes? So
I'm not the ultimate expert here. So first of all, we use RFID in our self-checkout machines. And when we implemented FOLIO with the Biblioteca machines, we were obviously the first library to use FOLIO with Biblioteca. And we had a lot of direct communication with them, and they created like a setup for FOLIO specific settings for their machines that we could use. So I assume that the next library implementing FOLIO with Biblioteca machines will be able to utilize that. But we had a lot of direct communication during that implementation process with them.
And do you use RFID or barcodes?
Well, we use RFID and barcodes, I would say, I guess. So we, we have RFID chips that are also, that have barcodes attached to them. So almost all of our items have barcodes in FOLIO.
Thank you. Peter, what sort of data did you import from Intoda?
So we exported everything we could from Intoda. You know, librarians have always been able to export pretty much all the information that is there in the former serial solutions, and I will say I'm pleased that after it was acquired, the owners continued to allow that to be the case. So there were many spreadsheets which we downloaded of all kinds of different information, and all of the license information that we had maintained about how many concurrent users you have, and if walk-ins are allowed, and all this. This was all already in Intoda. We downloaded it from Intoda, and then we mapped all of those from the spreadsheets that we had downloaded from Intoda. We mapped it to line it up so that we could then import it into FOLIO. FOLIO is seems at times, it seems almost infinitely flexible, maybe to a fault. It just makes it really challenging because you can do almost anything you want in some ways, and so you can define all of these things, and it does become a challenge, because then you're sort of like, well, how do I make this like, if we have many different levels of users, if I put all of that in there, how do I ensure that I can then pull out information about, say, which resources are only available to certain users or things like that? But the point is that we exported the information from Intoda, we mapped it to how we wanted it to look in FOLIO, and then we imported it there. And for the most part, it was successful.
I think, so I wasn't very involved in the ERM migration at Chalmers, but one interesting thing is that when we migrated the print resource bibliographic data and the users and the loans, we tried to make everything as automated as possible. But when it came to the ERM, my colleagues who worked with that, they actually did a lot of the migration work manually. So they could really sort of explore how they wanted to represent these resources in FOLIO. And explore the possibilities and try to sort of think anew. And so that took it's taken a lot of work, but I think that it was interesting how we had these different sort of different approaches to the migration.
I'll chime in here too. At MSU, we had an access database-based ERM system, basically, for lack of a better word. And we're mostly manually migrating them, but we did bring over some of the organization data and some of the acquisitions data, but that's about all we brought over in terms of like direct migration of our system. We're working on trying to finagle some of the access database data into something that could be imported in an automated fashion in FOLIO, but we've not gotten there yet.
So we were just very lucky, I think, because our old system has a very, well, a very closed data model. So there are not so many changes to that, apart from this problem with agreement periods. That was one of the only things we really had to think about. And so it was very easy to take a lot with us. Yes.
How does FOLIO handle print serials management control, such as check-in, claiming, etc.?
So there is check-in functionality. This is one of the things I think that is sort of very rapidly developing now. There are several things that are not there yet, but that are going to come soon. And at Chalmers, we don't have that many ongoing print serials. So this is one of the things we sort of have to wait for the functionality in FOLIO to get as good as it was in Sierra. So there's check-in functionality. What's missing right now is the sort of automation and predictive part of that that we're really looking forward to having soon. and it's been working for us so far because we don't have that much material. But I think it's going to be pretty similar to what we had before with check-in and the expected dates and things like that.
How does FOLIO handle cataloging, both creating MARC records locally and importing MARC records from, for example, OCLC?
I'm happy to jump in here real quick. Currently, there is not native MARC editing or creation capability within FOLIO. There are two projects right now that are working on editors for that. The big one that's been in development for quite a while is MARCcat. And there's also some very, very new efforts to try and get something minimally available for some of the folks that are going live this summer. It's a basic MARC editor. And then there's a data import section that will allow you to import one-off or bulk record import, and there's a mapping system that you can build a different map for doing things like if you have to bring in items or holdings information as part of your MARC records, you can tell that where to go in the FOLIO system and things like that. The inventory system, if you bring in a MARC record, we'll store the MARC record locally, and then it will also create an inventory record, a native inventory record in FOLIO that basically points to that MARC record, and any editing of that record takes place in the MARC, not in the FOLIO inventory system at the instance level, which is the top level bib level.
So when we started implementing FOLIO, the MARC editor, it was quite far off in the future, and that made us realize that we didn't actually need it because we do our cataloging in the Union catalog, which is BibFrame based. So doing work in MARC and FOLIO would just be unnecessary. So as I see it, our Union catalog is our sort of cataloging app for FOLIO, and then we manage items and holdings in inventory. And we built that integration ourselves, and it's using the FOLIO inventory API, so it's posting records there, and it's also looking for updates in the Union catalog so that we're keeping up to date. But I don't really know, but I think there are OCLC integrations being built as well, but that's...
Yeah, they're under development right now.
Yeah.
I've not seen much of, I've not been following it too closely. I think our catalogers are currently planning to do most of their work in WorldCat, or in Connection and WorldCat, and then just bring the record down and then import it manually.
Yeah. And that's actually what we were doing in Sierra with the Union catalog earlier before FOLIO. So for us, FOLIO and being able to build that integration has been a big enhancement for the cataloging workflow.
So I think this question is, which problems did you run into when you were implementing FOLIO in your library?
I think one of the biggest issues that several people have already mentioned is just keeping up with changes. It's so wonderful that FOLIO is developing so fast, and it's partly our fault because we're asking for new functionality and we're asking for enhancements, but just keeping track of everything that is happening everywhere and sort of keeping being part of the important discussions that are being held so that things develop the way you want them to. And for us, I think it was also a challenge to sort of figure out the balance between being a member of the FOLIO community and being a customer and sort of going through EBSCO. So I think for us, it took a while before we realized how important it is to have staff resources that are actually part of the discussions in Folio, and that are part of that communications to keep track of all the changes. Yeah.
Similar stuff at Missouri State. One big change for us was coming out of the model we're currently in, where we're part of a consortium. The consortium managed a lot of the ILS system side of things in terms of dealing with the vendor. All that stuff was done through the consortial offices. But so we're building up some somewhat atrophied skills there in terms of being able to interface directly with the hosting provider and things like that. Getting folks involved in the Folio community, getting them on the SIGs, getting them involved in discussions, kind of changing from a we use what the vendor gives us basically mindset of using the system to a we can actually push this system in a meaningful way forward by voicing our requirements and things we'd like to see in the system and stuff like that. We're hoping at some point to be able to do some more active development participation in our system, but right now we're so overwhelmed with the timeline that we have and the other two systems we're also trying to implement. I've been somewhat distracted today because we went live with EDS and Open Athens, and we're having some Open URL redirector problems that I've been trying to work with this morning before I got on the call. So it's one big thing, kind of takeaway for us was that if we had it to do over again, we would probably have started the process a little earlier or had our go live date a year later than what it currently is. There were a lot of reasons why it was what it was, but that's kind of the big one, is give yourself a lot of time because it's getting better. I think maybe in like a year, maybe a year and a half, it will be a lot less important to give yourself that much time. But right now, with the way the community is and the way the development is currently proceeding apace, it's unless you have a humongous amount of resources and people to dedicate to the process full time, it definitely can be overwhelming a little bit.
If I can jump in about the speed with which the development is going on the ERM side of things, we met in Göttingen, Germany to kick off the ERM project essentially 2 years and 2 weeks ago. And I mean, that was absolutely the beginning of the development process. It's primarily been funded by German library consortia, and the development's been done by an English company. And where we are now after 2 years, and especially with so many librarians providing so many opinions, literally every week, twice a week in a sense, I think it's amazing where we are right now after just 2 years in the ERM development process.
There's nothing more to add, I think. Just only to emphasize this speed is really enormous, and that was also a problem for us in deciding and staying with our decision on which release we want to migrate on. So we had a go live date initially that was in January. And then we thought, well, if we have Edelweiss and we have agreement periods, then we will wait for another release. And I think I just said that we will migrate to Femflower because there are even more things that we really like to have, and it doesn't feel right to migrate now when it's just on the way. And I think that's something you really need to take care of, that you don't do it too often. But it's, yeah, you see how many great things start to pop up in the new releases. It's really
I think what you said, Annika, about finding that good enough point is such a big thing. We also delayed our implementation by, I think, by a few months. But so sort of not being afraid to do that, but also being able to say that, yes, let's do it. Let's not delay forever. And that was very much a learning experience for us, being able to sort of figure out what we needed and also like testing workflows, looking at the data we migrated. Is this good? Is it good enough? Yes.
So Brooks, you brought up the number of people dedicated to implementing. How many people are participating in implementation?
Our steering committee is composed of 6 people. Like I said, that does both EDS, OpenAthens, and FOLIO stuff. We have probably, the IAWGs probably have about 8 or 9 other people who are actively involved in that process, depending on what we're doing at the time. And then pieces, we pull people in for conversations about different aspects of their work and workflows and everything on a regular basis as well. So basically, I'd say about half of our staff is actively involved in that process. The other half are in special collections and reference and research, and they don't have as much involvement in that process. But all of our circuit staff and our systems staff and a lot of the library administration is also involved in the process, and our acquisitions group as well.
So this one's specific to you, Brooks. It says, is MSU going to try and rejoin Mobius Union Catalog through the InReach API? And will you write to the API?
That's something we're definitely interested in looking at. That's one of those projects that I mentioned I'd like to have some time to dedicate resources to, is building something using the InReach APIs to create that integration between FOLIO and III's products. But that's something that's backburnered for right now. Now, that's definitely something we're looking to explore once we've gotten through the initial implementation phase of our project.
So for everyone, from your experience, are the performances with FOLIO satisfying?
I can jump on here too. So far, it's been pretty good. I think as far as bringing the records into the system in more of a quasi-production state, we were one of the larger sets so far that's gotten that we've been testing in some of the test instances for the project, for the community, FOLIO community, with a few million records. But so far it's been, especially since the Edelweiss release happened, and it's gotten better, even better in Flameflower, that it's relatively perform. We've got, so there's some stuff with infinite scrolling lists that's being addressed in the community, and that's just a question of applying some fixes across the system that haven't been applied yet. But so far it's been good and getting better every release. Yeah,
and I think it's definitely been acceptable. That it's been, some parts are better than other, and for our so we have about 250,000 instances in FOLIO and not that many users and not that much circulation. It's been working pretty well, and I know that performance is something that is going to be worked on a lot in I think the coming months with FOLIO. So it's going to get better and more adapted to larger data sets that haven't really been tried as much as ours.
I think it's really important to remember that this is a very new product, that there are lots of lots of things in it that are changing sort of constantly. And so as those of us here as early adopters were comfortable with and willing to accept some challenges here and there and some limitations, but that also means we can influence how the development goes, and we can say, hey, these are areas that really matter and are important to get addressed. So I think that I know that at Cornell we have identified some problems and some challenges, and we'll need to make sure that it can handle a large set of very large set of bibliographic data and manage it well. But that's the kind of nature of a new product, and so it's important that folks go in with that recognition of that and the pros and the cons that come along with that.
Yes, we are still experimenting with different hardware, so it's not because we did have performance issues, but we thought it would be even better to have it on some different hardware. And there's still a lot to go and a lot to experiment with. And I think the only part I ever had problems with Folio was in bug fests, where very many people click on on one system at once. But also there, it was always somebody who could fix it, and it's always a lesson to learn and to improve the system. And as Peter said, it's a new system, and we all really have to learn how to best host it and what to do about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think us going live, or like all of us going live and using the system daily, that's how we're going to be able to improve those things and make them even better, because that's sort of like how you notice those things.
So does anyone have experience migrating from Ex Libras's Aleph ILS? Doesn't appear so. How are items created? Is there some function to create them on the fly during bib record import, or is it manual?
I think I can maybe jump in a little bit here. Depends on how you're importing your bib records. If you're importing bib records that have item tags in them, you can build and import basically job profile that will create items based on that data. It'll create holdings and items. Folio's inventory system uses an instance record, a holdings record, and an item record. And you can kind of build your import profiles to create those as needed during the import process if the data is there in the MARC record you're importing.
So this is a comment. Thanks for all your hard work and helping us prepare for our own implementation. And then Lisa, are you going to use the check-in and check-out features at some point?
Oh, so the check-in and check-out features, that's the circulation part. And we are using that. So yes, we're using that daily.
All right. And then I think there was a question in chat. Somebody asked if there will be functionality in Folio that allows users to be able to change the size of the text for themselves.
You mean the interface text? Is that? Sorry.
I think the text of the size of the font, size of the text in the interface.
I think you could just zoom since it's web-based. That's how I would assume to do it, or how I would do it right now.
Kind of like what Peter did earlier.
Yeah. What I didn't do.
And then the question is, somebody said they weren't using check-in and check-out.
Maybe that was someone else. we are using that.
Maybe we at the moment, because we only have ERM. But we will use it.
Yeah.
We will eventually.
Yeah.
We're not in production yet on ours.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lisa. We're not in production yet on ours. We're going to be using it. We've been using it in testing. One thing I didn't mention in my presentation is we're also using a self-checkout system. We're using Syntex Meet Scan system, and it's using a SIP2 interface for that as well, similar to the biblioteca one that Lisa mentioned earlier.
Yeah, most of our checkouts and check-ins happen through the biblioteca machine, so that integration is put to hard work.
Finally worked your way through all the questions. We're past the 90-minute mark. Does anybody have any final thoughts or words of wisdom they want to share? Oh, well.
It's a great opportunity. And the community has been really interesting. The thing that I have found most valuable is the way that librarians are very, very directly involved with the development, the definition of the problems, and working through every step. I've been on both sides of the library vendor relationship, and this has been the most remarkable bit that I've seen, where the developers will develop something, and then at that week's call, they'll say, this is what we've done. What do you think? And we find problems. We say that looks great, and we really move forward. And it's much more connected between the eventual users and the developers than other projects that I've been involved with.
And as you were speaking, one more question came in. How does the load profile function operate? Is it similar, for example, to how it is done with the III load profile application with regex capability? I don't know the answer to that.
So we haven't used the load profiles in FOLIO, as I wouldn't know about that. I've used them in Sierra, which I guess is what they mean maybe by III. I'm hoping that at least the interface for creating load profiles is much easier in FOLIO than it was in Sierra.
I think from what I've seen, I think it should be.
Yeah.
I don't know about the
I don't
know about the regex capabilities, for stuff for regular expressions. I definitely recommend reaching out to the metadata management SIG to kind of for more information about the import functionality, because they've been doing a lot of work on that recently, and there's been a lot of changes to the interface for that. And a lot of that's coming available in the Flameflower release here in April. So.
Does FOLIO have linked data features for records that you're using?
I wouldn't say that it has linked data features, but the inventory format, it's obviously not MARC, and it's BibFrame based. And since in Sweden our UNIA catalog is also BibFrame based, we would be very happy to see more development in that area in FOLIO. But it definitely, for something to get developed or explored more in FOLIO, you need libraries who ask for it and who want to develop it. So the more libraries involved in FOLIO that actually want some sort of linked data functionality, the more likely it is that that's going to happen.
There's always been in our wiki a page with a linked data working group, but it never formed, I think. But
yeah.
I think that's something many libraries would be interested in.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Somebody has to start it.
Yeah. And I think because the Swedish libraries were sort of forced into working with linked data when the Union catalog switched to that, I'm hoping that some Swedish colleagues might make that together with us.
I think that's a good stopping point. This concludes today's FOLIO forum covering the experiences of our early implementers. For a short recap and links to resources, look for the FOLIO_LSP Twitter feed. You can continue the conversation at the FOLIO discussion website, discuss.folio.org, and on Twitter using the hashtag FOLIOforum. The recording of today's forum will be posted to YouTube shortly. Thank you to our speakers, Lisa, Peter, Brooks, and Annika, and to everyone who asked questions and added comments. Thank you.